Father, as we go through this class today, through these worship services, we just pray that you would be with us. We know you've said where two or three are together, that there you are also. So we pray that the things that are said and done this morning are in accordance with your will, Father, and please you, and that we would gain much from the class this morning to help us better serve you. We'd ask, Father, that you would be with those who are unable to be here, whether sick, traveling, or whatever the hindrance. We just ask that you would be with them and help them to return to us again soon as well. Forgive us the times that we fail you, Father, is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen.
All right, so we're going to continue on our discussion in 1 Timothy. We've been talking about in chapter 3, talking about qualifications for elders, and just kind of going through each one of those listed and talking about it a little bit. We're going to keep doing that today and get into qualifications for deacons. Talk about that some, although they're not terribly different from elders, so we'll probably go through that a little bit quicker. See how far we get today. Does anybody have any questions from or thoughts about what we talked about last time? Last week we talked about children and managing his household, how that includes, Ernie made a good point, that includes the children, but that doesn't exclude everything else. That it's the household as a whole, not just the children, which is what oftentimes seems to get focused in on out of that verse. So we're in we'll pick up in, let's see. Let's pick up in verse 6, 1 Timothy 3. I'll go ahead and read through 7, and we'll talk about those two verses. He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. Why is that important? I don't remember if we talked about this last week. If we did, I don't think we covered it very much. Why is it important not to be a recent convert? Yeah. Puffed up with conceit. What does that mean? Yeah. Yeah, what's that mean?
But it appears to me, again, if we're going to treat everything one way, we need to treat it all the same way. And so it doesn't even have a. When I look at new convert, I think of someone who has recently become a member of the church.
Mm-hmm.
I don't put a time frame on it, but it appears that Paul is telling him here that he has to at least begin to prove himself.
Yeah.
To begin to show that he's willing to serve, and willing to serve, he's willing to learn.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a growth factor. So it's kind of like children. Some mature more too than
right.
Before.
Yep.
So I treat it kind of that way, looking at the person, but not being, in my opinion, someone who just was baptized and hasn't shown any. But I think that also, to me, is we usually use this as, I've heard argued, well, he's talking about those that are 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, those that are very young. Convert. I don't think he's talking about it. I think he's talking about a new convert. It's 50 years old.
Yeah. I agree.
That's the way I would treat it.
Yeah, I think
Me,
that's,
if I was looking for that.
I think that's right. I mean, if you can't, someone that's, just learned about Christ last week and doesn't even understand what an overseer does. It shouldn't be, well, you're, just because you're an older male that just became a Christian last week, it doesn't mean that you're qualified to, if you don't understand, and if you're a new convert, then that would be definitely not fit this qualification, in my opinion. So,
Well, in my opinion, I think it takes at least about 6 to 9 months to find out what the person's going to do. And
it's possible.
a year,
It's probably, that's probable and likely. Yeah, it could be a month for some people, though. I mean, if that's all they do all day, every day is study.
Well, that's
But-
true that, most people in this day and age doesn't have
Well, I won't argue with that.
that kind of time, but if you're a new convert and somebody was studying with you for 3 weeks and they say, I want to be a Christian, and they become a Christian, and you don't know anything about them other than they're just good workers in their jobs.
Yeah.
That's not to say that they're going to be a good worker for
No.
Christ.
No.
So I would think that you would need a minimum of at least, I'd say probably 9 months.
That's likely.
And then after that time there, you can say, well, this person's really a good worker.
It could be
Works for
10 years for some people, 20. So yeah, it's just, say it's all relative to the person and their maturity level and how fast they pick up things, how quickly they learn and mature.
I think it was different in this region and of course in times, but here in America, you can be basically a new convert for years and years and years without really much growth.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it was much different back then.
More
People are people.
persecution and stuff.
Well,
You think about all the places that are heavily persecuted, and it just seems to me there is great movement there. And there's not a whole lot of people that only have, a spiritual milk,
Mhm.
as opposed to spiritual meat.
Right.
Paul calls those people, if you read 1 Corinthians 6 chapter, Paul calls the 3rd chapter, the end of 2 and the end of 3, he calls them carnal. In other words, they're people who are still got their mind in the world. I think that's the difference.
that's a good point. I was reading last night. Some of you probably read the Radically Christian blog by Wes McAdams. He's a preacher for the church. I think it's in Abilene. But he wrote, he put something on Facebook last night. It was very true that, we're not going to bring, his point was, if you love anything more than Christ, whether it's football or your job or whatever it is, that worldly thing is going to come in between you and spreading the gospel or making people aware that you're a Christian, that it's going to be a hindrance, that Christ and God should be our first love, not, and it shouldn't be, I wish I had it up there, I could read it, but I thought it was really interesting the way he worded it, because it was true. I mean, if you have something that you love more than God, then what's that taking the place of? Where should God be? So it becomes an idol, right? Yeah, that's good. I think that's true, Randy. We've been kind of harping on this over and over. Culture, right? Our culture today. Now, not saying that a lot of that culture wasn't existent back then, as we know it was, and there's that phenomenon. We always have the good old days,
That's
Sometimes.
exactly what the Hebrew letter, Hebrew 5
Yeah.
talks about.
Yep.
The time you ought to be teachers, in other words, the time that you need to be eating.
Yeah, but you're still on milk.
Milk.
Yeah. So it's always been around. It's just when you're living in it, I think it just you feel like it's magnified. I think that's a fairly common thing in human nature.
Quick question. I've got the New King James, and you know, you read a new convert. Mine says a novice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I think of novice, I was thinking of Clayball ago. You know, if you're going to do a brain surgeon, I don't want a novice working on my head. I want somebody who's been there, who's done it, who has the experience, and
Mhm.
knows what to do.
Yeah. Yep.
It's the same with
Yeah.
an elder.
Right.
I want somebody that's, like I said, proven himself, and you know what he's going to do.
Well, that's the whole, I mean, the whole reasoning, I mean, we've been talking about this, but what's the elders, the overseers, what's their role? What are they in charge of doing? Like, what tasks are they to do? And for what reason?
Well, they're called an overseer because they're overseeing you and your soul. And,
Yeah.
I mean, their major task is to make sure not only themselves, but the body that they're overseeing reach the goal.
Exactly. So if you've got someone in there that's not even proven themselves to be able to stay faithful or doesn't meet any of these qualifications that most Christians are supposed to meet anyway. But most of them Christians are supposed to meet anyway. Not most Christians. All Christians are supposed to meet. That's what I would say. But if he's not doing those things, then what kind of trust are you going to have in that person? Are you going to be able to take them seriously? If they come to you and say, look, you need to change this, and they're doing the same thing, I mean, are you going to be able to have respect for that? You know, but it's the same thing. You know, it's hard to, you can't gauge a doctor. Like if it said a new doctor comes in to work on your head, it's like, well, have you done this before? Well, no. Well, your confidence level is going to be pretty low, right? You're going to go, well, I don't know if I want you in my head. So
Well, I think that it's good. James uses that, but see, I've heard argued that they have the knowledge. It's not the knowledge.
no, it's not.
Because Clay could have looked at books and read books
Yep.
all day long. He's kind of like going to driver's school and never touches the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's not talking about a knowledge base. He's talking about a servant base, a growth base, and being able to get along with people and stuff. In other words, just kind of proving yourself.
Yep.
You know, he may have been in the church for 35 years and know more than all of us put together. That doesn't make him qualified. You know?
No, if it did, all it would say is knowledge, right? All these qualifications would be like, oh, as long as he knows.
Yeah.
But it's not what it.
So the thing I'm saying is I think the selection process has always been very important.
Mhm.
I think to me, and it should be, I think, to everyone else that needs to be in here. But we need to treat them all the same. We need to try to understand what it says.
Yeah.
It says not to cover. He's not talking about. Well, Tommy knows more than I do, so he's qualified. That's all he's talking about.
I mean, that's part. I mean, knowledge is important, but
Always correct.
the application,
I'm not
Yeah.
saying that. Yeah. That's part of some of the other stuff.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like I say, I mean, I tell you this. I had many college professors that knew their stuff, but they were terrible teachers. Didn't learn a thing from them. They just couldn't convey that, or they would get off on some rant, you know, or their attitude was terrible and you just didn't want to listen to them. So, yeah, knowledge means little if you can't apply it. And I think we've all seen that. If you've had a job, you know, you've probably seen people that have great skill, you know, great learning, have been to college for 10 years and they can't do anything. So, Mhm.
They don't have to do that anymore. That's not their job.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of, if you've never experienced where someone has been, then how are you going to help them with that?
yeah. point. Does anybody have anything else other than puffed up with conceit? Curious, what is pride? Some pretty strong words there, right? Fall into the condemnation of the devil. What does that mean? Right? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, and if you're proud too, it's hard to be a servant.
Well, you get into what Mom was saying. Yeah, if you're proud, it's like, well, I have this elevated position. I don't have to do that. Yeah. You can't be a servant with that attitude, right? All right, so verse 7. Now, this is fascinating to me. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. It's interesting to me that for an overseer of the Lord's church, and we're concerned of what the outsiders think of the person, people that aren't in the church. It's just as it's interesting to see, to try to see the relationship between the church and the world, right? And that God's concerned with for obvious reasons, that he wants the church to be seen as what? And the people that are overseeing the church to be seen as what? Upright people? Absolutely.
That's why the world's always ready to grab. I mean, I will be held, if you and I were out doing something together that created a reproach on the church, it wouldn't talk about fear, it would talk about earnest for these things. And you, the minister, would be vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same way they do with the elders.
Absolutely.
They grab onto them, grab onto them, grab onto them. I say, well, look at church pride, what kind of leadership they have.
Yeah, this guy, yeah.
Frankly, brother,
Yep.
on church. So that's just the way we think.
No, I agree. And it's fascinating to me that the last one here has to be well thought of by outsiders. It seems like that might be getting harder and harder to do.
Yeah, this is pretty deep, but it seems like being thought of well by outsiders just means that your character is evident around you, even at work or wherever.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just here.
Yeah.
So obviously that's not going to mean every single individual thinks you're the greatest thing.
No.
Because we are to instruct and correct people, and if they're of the mind of being militantly atheist or
Absolutely.
non-
Yeah.
or
And that's my point.
so much that they hate everybody that's associated with it.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a good report among them.
I guess that's what I was getting at is it seems like it's getting harder and harder to do that because it seems as if, I like the word phrasing you used, militant atheism is becoming really popular and growing, unfortunately. And that militant word is true. They will attack you just for no other reason than saying that you're a Christian. So, yeah, you're not Not everybody's going to love you. But yeah, your character should be evident of, people should be able to trust you with anything they, the job they're hiring you to do, or you're watching their house or whatever, they would know that there's no issues with you doing that. So. Mhm. Well, that's true. There are many like that. Yeah, and there's a lot to be said about that too. And then that kind of comes up with the pride thing, right? Being puffed up. So, but then, a lot of the world would think all of us that way. So even though we may not be, they see that we're not doing the things that they do. Well, you too good to do that?
People, even though they're religion or denomination, look at the church as being, well, they think they're the only one that's going to heaven. Yeah, we've all heard that.
Mm-hmm.
So, once again, not everybody's going to love you, not going to like you. I mean, if that's what it meant,
Yeah, there would be.
Look at Paul. Look at Peter.
Yeah.
Jesus himself. They had their enemies, but none of them could question their character, their honesty, their faith, their loyalty to God and Christ.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's it. That's exactly it.
Peter writes, he said, don't let your good be evil. So the thing that we need to understand is always have a reputation.
Absolutely.
That's at least that's what it's.
Mm-hmm. And it matters. Mm-hmm.
I remember Charles Barkley, basketball stars, and what they were talking about is example and stuff. I'm not examining anybody, that's not why I'm basketball player, but he is an example, whether he likes it or not.
That's right.
He is an example.
People are looking at you whether you want them to look at you or not. Yeah. You can't just say, I don't want you to look at me. Well, sorry, it doesn't work that way. We all have to work in that environment.
We're supposed to be winning people to Christ, and if they can't look on us with esteem or, recognize there's something we live for that's not just us or just, the new thing or whatever, then we're never really going to have the reputation that we have to draw people in, or even for some one-on-one counseling.
Mm-hmm.
People might be looking for, and they can't see that we live to a higher standard. Why would you seek counsel among fools?
Yeah, you wouldn't. Yeah. I also think the end of that verse, so they may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. That almost implies to me that, what is disgrace? Does anybody else have anything else there? I'm trying to figure, been thinking about that. What does that mean? If somebody on the outside doesn't think well of you, it would have to be for a reason that's legitimate, right? Otherwise, why would you be disgraced or be reproached? So it kind of goes back to that character thing I think you were talking about, where, not everybody's going to like you, and they may bring charges against you that are baseless.
Yeah, people are going to lie about you and talk about you, but I think this is about them being right when they do it.
Exactly. Yeah, I think so too. I'd like to hear if anybody else has any thoughts on that, because if it's a lie, if it's a baseless charge, you're going to have that. It's just the way the world works. But if it's a legitimate claim, then it's.
That depends on who it is and what it is. Just because one person out of 10 million say he's not any good.
Yeah,
That's
right.
pretty good. But if all of Bridge Creek said earnings doesn't have to be careful, if that's the tone, whether that's true or not, because that's a handle that the church.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay. So that's what it's talking, it's not talking about that, because I'm sure that all of us in there, a bunch of people that they were bad.
Yeah, right.
Or something, but it's a general consensus.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Well, I mean, it could definitely be that, but then it could be as much as, I definitely think that's true. But if there's one person that said that, you know, you stole a car from them last week, you know, that's an issue as well, right? Because that's going to spread quickly into the issue that you're talking about, where the community will know about that. Well, so-and-so stole a car and he's,
That has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
On that basis, not the basis that the community thinks you're bad.
yes,
Yeah, it will spread, but if you have that's probably some of what he's pointed out.
Mhm.
I look at the Christian soldier, maybe doesn't have all the soldiers, the armor, so therefore, somewhere the dark
Attack.
devil.
Yeah.
But I think that if someone came to me today and said, Donnie stole your car, I wouldn't believe it.
right.
I mean, you know, it's
Yeah.
a threat. I wouldn't believe it. I mean, they'd have to prove to me.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I might even go to Donnie and say, here's what's going on.
Mm.
But you know, those things, that has to be dealt with.
Right, for sure.
Well, I think that's what it means, you know, goes back, we talked about in the first part of it, we talked about being blameless, and we talked about that very thing. If something like that comes up, people know you, and their first thought is like, yeah, that snake, it's like, no.
Yeah, that's
It's
a
the
good
same-
point.
It's just the same, you know,
Yeah.
Donnie that I know.
Right.
But I don't believe it,
That's a good indicator of, yeah. Now, if they're like, well, yeah, I can see that, you know, then
there's a problem.
exactly, yeah. Yeah. My keys are in my pocket, Donnie, and I didn't leave them. All right, let's go on to read 8. Somebody read, let's go ahead and do 8 through 13.
Likewise, deacons must be ready, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy for money, holding the mystery of the faith with a pure conscience. But let these also first be tested, then let them serve as deacons, being found blameless. Likewise, their wives must be reverent, not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. Let deacons be the husbands of one wife, ruling their children and their own houses well. For those who have served well as deacons obtain for themselves a good standing and great boldness in the faith which is in Christ Jesus.
All right. So we're talking about deacons here. What does deacon mean? Servant. So it's that there's a word there in verse 8. Starts off verse 8 and what Jamie just read. Likewise. So what does that mean? Who have we been talking about?
Like what we were just talking about, like the elders.
Yeah.
deacons too must be.
These things. So we've already discussed much of this with the elders, right? What's double-tongued? Speaking out of both sides of your mouth, right? You speak this way with one group of people or this way with this group of people? Oh, yeah.
Majority says this.
You'll go with it, yeah. whatever, what you say depends on your audience, not how you say it. I mean, that's one thing. How you say something may change, but what you say, as far as it comes to the truth, should stay the same. Not addicted to much wine. What in the world does that mean?
I'll tell you, brother, not giving the wine for the elders, not addicted to much wine here. It's in a lot of arguments.
Yep.
Whether it's talking about fermented wine, the John 2 thing, that fermented wine.
Is that, yeah. Yeah, that Greek word, oinos, is that right? It could be either. And so both sides of that argument, they can argue, it's been an argument for years and years and years. Whether that means non-alcoholic wine, barely alcoholic wine, which we all know that we can agree with that it was much less alcoholic then than it is today. It was way less alcohol content than it is today. Yeah. Sure, absolutely.
Still is in California. There's elders of the church in California that they sit down and have a glass of wine with their meal.
Probably have a vineyard, because vineyards are common out there too. So. Yep. We won't. I mean, we can get into that study if you guys want, but we're probably not gonna touch that today. Yep. There's really, I mean, the best you could do is look at both sides and then study it out for yourself. I have an opinion, but people would, and I have been told and will continue to be told that I'm wrong on it. So.
Well, I'll give you my opinion, because I don't know if it's right or not. My opinion is, why would one say not give it wine and one not addicted to wine? Meaning wine can be very addictive.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning to me that it has some fermentation.
Yep.
Okay. And not giving it wine, the elders don't take it under circumstances because it may cause the brother to stumble, for instance, or
You're right.
that example, or you could become addicted to it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, sitting down and having a glass of wine back there with their meal was
Pretty common.
not only medicinal.
Yeah.
I mean, they even say today, well, red wine is
Mhm.
good.
In your heart. There's studies saying that, yeah.
So I don't know to what point it was fermented. Like you said, some
Yeah.
say it was watered down quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter to me, but especially the old preachers tell me that argue the point, and I'm not trying to change anybody's mind here, and I'm not trying to say drinking wine should or shouldn't. All I'm saying is for the argument that there's no fermentation in any of the biblical, I think, in my opinion,
Why would he be telling you not to drink wine if there wasn't some kind of consequence
yeah.
connected to it?
And there is arguments out there that there's no way, like you'll see arguments out there that people will say, well, it had to be alcoholic wine. They didn't have any way of preserving it otherwise. And if you study that out, that's not true. It actually did. So I found this interesting, so I'm going to share it. But what they would do is they'd put it in containers and they could bury not bury it. I'm thinking about baptism, but they would put it in the water into like the deep part of a pond or whatever, and it was cold down there, and it would basically act as a refrigerator. So you could keep grape juice down there. So it's an interesting. The things they thought of to keep things cold that you would just like, well, they didn't have refrigerators, so everything would spoil. Well, people are pretty smart. They figure out ways around problems that may not be well known today. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Back then, they pretty much ate up what they had.
Yeah.
They didn't keep it 2 months like we do.
Right.
Like bread, you ate almost daily,
Mhm.
every 2 days.
But then, you got grapes and stuff that are seasonal. So if you had an abundance of grapes and you wanted to make some grape juice and store it, you could do that. They had ways of doing that without necessarily making wine. All right, well, guess I'm done with my computer. Greedy for dishonest gain, we've talked about that. Not lovers of money. Same thing with the elders, overseers. They must hold to the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience. What does that mean? Does a clear conscience automatically mean that you're right? That's where I was getting. Yeah, I was going to bring that up as an example. He absolutely had a clear conscience about what he's doing. He thought he was doing the right thing.
We lean on our own understanding and have a clear conscience about what we're doing.
Yeah, that's right. But what if you don't have a clear conscience? Does it point to that you know something's wrong? In every case, if you're working against your conscience, especially as a person in the church, then is there an issue there, or could there be an issue there? Yeah, it's kind of funny how that works. You can have a clean conscience and not be, and still be doing wrong. But if your conscience is fouled and you know that you're doing something wrong, then you're likely doing something wrong, right? And let them be tested first, and let them serve as deacons. Then let them serve as deacons, if they prove themselves blameless. The Bible talks a lot about testing. Test yourselves, test deacons. What does that mean?
I think that's a lot like verse 6 that they were talking about elders not being a novice.
Yeah, I think so too.
Another way of saying it.
And for servants and deacons, you can give them, they can be assigned tasks, right? And if they're able to fulfill it and prove that they can serve in that magnitude, then they've been tested, right? They can do the job. They're able to serve. But if you give somebody a task and it's never gets done, they've been tested and it doesn't seem like they passed, right? That's the way I look at it. All right. Verse 11. Their wives likewise must be blameless, or likewise must be dignified, not slanderers, but sober-minded, faithful in all things. Okay. Who has a different version of verse 11 than that?
Reverent, non-slanderers, temperate. Faithful in all things.
Does anybody else say anything other than wives? Is that New American Standard? Okay. You'll find arguments on this verse too. New American Standard Version says, women likewise must be dignified, not slanderers, but open-minded, faithful in all things. That's a lot of difference than wives, right? Their wives. So people will try to use some versions of that, especially New American Standard and others that translate it as women, and say that that's talking about women deacons, woman deacons. What's the problem with that? You could read the next verse and you could find the problem with it. But it just doesn't fit to me. I mean, scholars argue that on me. It means, well, the literal word is woman. Well, in the context, it doesn't make sense to throw that in the middle of qualifications for deacons and say, oh, by the way, here's one qualification for a woman deacon.
Well,
It just doesn't
Chapter two,
fit at all.
we talk about the women's role in the church, let them learn in submission and not having authority over a man.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Ernie, you were saying something.
Well, you're not gonna win this argument no matter what. I can guarantee you, I heard your argument.
Yeah.
The wives and women, or deaconess, all, the same words used for all of them, depending on context.
Mhm. Right.
And there's two, both arguments are great, I think.
Mhm.
That you can, when you talk about women deacons, deaconess is an office. You don't see that. Women deacons is
Yeah.
just woman servant. It doesn't mean an office.
We see that.
We could use women deacons.
Absolutely.
If you want to put that in the sense of the Greek.
Yep.
Okay?
We have biblical example of that.
Church.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all that deacon means, is a servant. And the reason it's for malicious gossip, temper stuff is because women were different back in those days. So you can say wives here, but I have a problem with both of them, actually. I don't know which one it means, I'll be honest with you. I looked at it, I studied it, I read it, and you can have 50 scholars, 25 will say one, and 25 will say
Mhm.
the other. So you're not gonna win either way. But it appears to me that whichever it's saying goes the same for both, whether it's a wife or whether it's someone that he's talking about
Yeah, yeah.
serving in the church, like a woman is doing some things in the church, maybe cleaning the place, whatever she's doing, doesn't mean she's holding it off. And it was normal for widows and those to see that later,
Mhm.
go around from house to house, they didn't
Yep.
have anything else to do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't mean that in any relations. They're different than today. They didn't have authority much anything.
Mhm.
Okay, so, this is like, do not have a woman, whether it's a wife, I'm just saying, I don't know which one, whether it's a wife or one who people look up to in the church, who's cleaning or.
Yeah, they should have these.
Whatever it
Yeah.
is they're doing.
Yep.
Not have someone who is known outside as malicious gossip.
Slanderers, yeah.
Someone who's angry all the time, those
Mhm.
kind of things.
Yep.
So, whichever it means, I don't have a problem with women being,
Servant,
not
yeah.
all.
Right.
Servant.
And I guess that's where I feel like he's talking about an office here. And if he's talking about that, and then all of a sudden he says, it just seems misplaced. If it's not wives, to me, it doesn't make sense. Unless, for some reason, he throws in here the action of serving instead of the office of deacon.
Well, there was, one of the
But
reasons that Philemon was written that nobody ever discusses, because there was two women in the church that was causing trouble.
Mhm.
Okay? And Paul often, if you look at his writings, he's going along with the subject, and all of a sudden.
He does that a lot. He does that a lot.
Something comes to his mind, he writes it. So
Yeah.
I don't know what came to his mind here.
That's true.
You know?
Yeah.
But he writes it. What I'm saying there is there was two servants, and they talk about, Paul even talks in Romans 16 about Priscilla. I think Priscilla was a servant. in the church. So,
Yes, Phoebe. It was Phoebe.
I get it right.
But yeah,
Phoebe was a servant in the church, so I don't have a problem.
yeah, and the work there is deaconos. Same word. But we know by verse 12 what? That the official office of deacon could not be a woman for the reason of husband of one wife. You can't do that if you're a woman. All right, thanks. Huh?
I got a question about that.
Okay.
If it does mean wives, say you're up for deacon and your wife is not temperate, does that disqualify you?
Yeah, I would think so.
Man. Watch it.